With The Voyeurs, I thought I was going to watch a bad movie about the realities of becoming an adult, living together with your partner, sex, obsession, cheating, and I ended up watching Optometrist Batman Begins. This movie has fairly low ratings. Not abysmal, just bad. I watched it on one average rainy weekend on Amazon. So what else did I expect? That's what Amazon Prime is for, budget up TV movies. With some exceptions, that's true. The first two scenes scream TV movie. The movie is called The Voyeurs, and in the first sequence she watches you peeping on her. Someone thought this was clever. Pippa's walk to the apartment is a masterclass on doll framing with a budget. TV movies, even without a budget, are fine, especially for rainy weekends, if they don't pretend to be anything more than that. That's the cardinal sin of this movie, but by no means the only one. Let's summarize. A young couple, Pippa and Thomas, are moving to their first apartment together. Pippa is a trainee optometrist and Thomas is a freelancer musician. They happen to watch a neighbor couple having sex in the apartment across the street. This apartment is also a professional photography studio. Pippa fixates on these neighbors, that they call Brent and Margot. At the same time, she wonders if this, having a nice apartment in a major city with your partner and having a steady job, is all there is to life. When was this movie made? 1991? Pippa and Thomas discover Brent takes advantage of his job as a professional photographer to be unfaithful to Margot. Pippa spirals down into a full-blown obsession, and in the process she drags Thomas into back the neighbor's place. In a scene that belongs to some other movie but not this one, Pippa meets Margot as a client at the optical clinic and starts a friendship with her. Margot is actually Julia and Brent is actually Seb. Seb keeps cheating on Julia. Pippa's obsession with Seb takes a toll in her relationship with Thomas, and she ends up exposing Seb's infidelities to Julia, anonymously by a wireless printer, of course. Everything goes off the rails when Pippa and Thomas watch Seb discovering Julia's body after seemingly having slit her own throat. Pippa feels guilty, and Thomas, understandably fed up at this point, leaves her and the apartment. The next thing Pippa does is following Seb into a conveniently nearby pub and then go with him to his apartment. The apartment where a few days prior Seb's wife had unalived herself, in part as a result of Pippa's actions. Obviously, Pippa ends up having sex with Seb there that very night, as you do. She doesn't know Thomas came back home just in time to watch her have sex with the guy. Next morning, Pippa goes back home and discovers Thomas hanged himself. Days later, Pippa confesses to her friend Ari she's still thinking of Seb, and as a good friend, Ari accompanies her to Seb's next photography exhibition. There they discover Julia is alive, Seb and Julia are the owners of their apartment, and the lease included a clause that stated they consented to be photographed. Actually, the exhibition was about Pippa and Thomas. It was an artsy experiment, who is watching who. Pippa storms off and deduces the truth. Julia dragged a drink to kill Thomas and staged his unaliving. Pippa then lures the couple, spikes the drinks, and uses a LASIK machine to blind them. The movie ends with Pippa watching the couple from a rooftop, but omits her jumping to the next rooftop and her superhero costume. It's a lot. People have written the twists of the movie come out of nowhere, test any suspension of disbelief. They have said it's all in service of getting spicy, because Sydney guys. And all of that is true, but the actual seeing of the twist is that they don't affect at all the story of the movie. It's not that they don't make sense, it's that they don't belong in the movie. You know that famous concept that actually in Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indy doesn't affect the plot at all? That if he didn't exist, the Nazis would have found the Ark and died the same way they did? Well, this is similar. The first half of the movie hammers you over the head with Pippa's growing dissatisfaction with her life, starting with this "let's don't be a boring couple yet" moment. Then with a "my boyfriend doesn't seem as attracted to me anymore" scene. This is a premise out of a porn movie. But okay, Pippa and Thomas' relationship is not perfect. She goes to work and has this exchange. Sorry, wrong movie. This scene.
20 years.
Yeah, and I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up.
That stirs her to buy a pair of binoculars to be naughty and watch the neighbor couple instead of buying Thomas an accordion, the boring option he had mentioned the night before. Very well, Pippa's got to this quarter-of-life crisis. I did everything I was supposed to. I have a dependable boyfriend, a job, a place to stay. Is that it? It couldn't be clear in the narrative. Pippa wants her life to be more exciting. This, in storytelling terms, is an external false desire. It's basically FOMO. It stems from an inner real need that the character has to confront. What's the need then? Maybe she studied and was a nice next-door girl all her life because she's a people pleaser. But actually she's the opposite. That would make her previous porn premise kick into gear. Maybe she doesn't actually love Thomas and only stuck with him because he was the sensible choice. Maybe she's running away from something from her past. But nothing of this is shown in the movie. There's no internal flaw to justify her soon-to-be obsession with the hot neighbor. And so, providing nothing about social expectations, immaturity, what really means to be a grown-up, etc., the movie unintentionally adheres by default to the porn/incel mantra. All women say they want a sensitive guy that gets them, but secretly they crave a morally rotten Chad. The movie could have made a point about monogamy. How no matter how much in love you are with your partner, chances are you are going to keep wanting to f other people. And if you don't have the maturity to take that in account, your relationship is going to suffer. Same with the wondering whether this is everything that is to life. There is no such thing as absolute happiness, Pippa, and you'll have to deal with that. But nothing of this is here. What are the twists of the movie? Pippa and Thomas thought they were watching their neighbors, invading their privacy, and turns out they were the ones watched, manipulated. But wait, when Pippa seems beaten, she learns their neighbors weren't just manipulative artsy assholes. They were actually sociopaths that killed Thomas and made it look like a suicide. And then Pippa rises from her ashes, becomes a sociopath herself, and punishes them with a life of blindness. Can someone please explain to me how Seb and Julia's manipulation affects Pippa's inability to appreciate what she has with Thomas? Precisely because Thomas dies, there is no reckoning with her lack of commitment. Pippa even says after Thomas dies, she's still obsessed with Seb, and when the truth is revealed in the second twist, the movie becomes a revenge detective story and pays no attention to Pippa's processing the humiliation, the manipulation, how her own shortcomings put her in that position and caused Thomas' death. She gets revenge, but she's never going to think, I should have valued my normal life a little more. She's going to think, next time I spy on some hot guy, I need to make extra sure he is not a crazy artsy killer. Good thing I'm a detective vigilante now. This is the end to another movie, especially because with Seb's revealed speech in the gallery, the story gets all pretentious and fails to examine the moral implications of what happened here. That is, who was worse? Pippa for being a bit immature, be a noisy neighbor and having an affair? Or Julia and Seb for concealing a legal alibi in order to manipulate and psychologically torture Pippa and Thomas for months, then kill Thomas, all with the aim of making an interesting photography exhibition? Who the fuck do you think it's worse? It drives me mad. Sydney Sweeney's character is a tragic idiot, the kind of person that drops a Greek fable in a conversation to tell herself she shouldn't sleep with this guy, because she already knows that's the only reason she's there. Few characters gave me so much second-hand embarrassment. It was so obvious Seb was going to tell her the fable was not about being content with what you have, but about teaching slaves not to dream with freedom. I wonder if the whole movie came from this scene. A clueless girl with a boyfriend gets all pedantic and tells the fable of the ass and his masters to reject a hot guy. But the guy explains to her what the fable actually means, that she's
deeply, deeply repressed.
And she sleeps with him. Let's build a movie around this. Again, the most porn premise ever. But that's not the only problem in the scene. For starters, nothing the character of Pippa foreshadowed or even hinted in the slightest at her being the kind of person that drops a reference from classic literature in a moment like this. The real kicker is that Pippa here is the movie. It comes at you waving a powerful message with baffling naivete. It proceeds to make a fool of itself herself, and the only thing of substance you get is the fantasy of proxy fucking a hot actress, a hot actor, or both, depending on your preferences. Maybe it's because I barely had seen Sydney Sweeney in the first episode of Euphoria at that point, and without the glitter on glitter on glitter of that show, anyone would look mundane. But I have to praise how the Voyeurs pulls off presenting her as this plain girl that can be sexy if she wants, but it's nothing that special. The costume design, makeup, hair, lighting, framing, everything sells her as a random trainee optometrist, and at no point it feels silly like in All That, or downright forced like in Madame Web. Her supposed plainness serves the character and the story. It's believable, and is the one thing in this movie that proves to you Sweeney is a good actress, because the way she carries herself is as important as everything else in selling you the illusion. The rest of the character, Amy Adams couldn't deliver this dialogue or this character arc convincingly. It's not her fault. In the span of a few months, Sydney Sweeney managed to star in 2 movies, one even worse than The Voyeurs, and one that is what The Voyeurs should have been. Honest. At the time of this recording, Anyone But You just became the highest grossing of the rom-com Shakespeare adaptations. The movie isn't perfect by any means, it's not my kind of movie, and there is a lot I don't like about it. The samey one-step over sitcom lighting, the self-aware dialogue, the camera-ready makeup even in the most look how relatable we are comedic moments. But maybe because the guy that wrote the original knew a thing or two about storytelling, the movie doesn't fool itself into believing it's something that it isn't. And at that moment there are plot points that belong to some other story. Spoilers for Anyone But You, I guess. Bea and Ben have a meet-cute that gets spoiled by a misunderstanding. Several months later, they see each other again because her sister and his friend are dating. They can't stand each other, but the wedding of those two and their own personal failures throws them into faking a relationship. They eventually realize they still have feelings for each other, they disappoint each other and finally reconcile, all through a series of misunderstandings that don't feel contrived because the movie established that as a plot device early on, and the comedic tone is perfect for the unrealistic resolution. The movie doesn't try to tell you anything more than a fun love story about 2 hot people getting together, striking the chord of I don't know what I'm doing with my life instead of having everything figured out is so boring. It also takes full advantage of how hot both of them are, and doesn't feel the need of throwing curveballs to do so.